to JermaineAuNatural. I am Jermaine Ryan. It is November, and I need to do this month's Black History a piece every month. But so you may remember the last time I did my Black History, and it was remixed. Remember that? It was for National Hispanic and Latino Heritage Month. So, doing the same thing again this month, but this month it is actually National Native American and Alaska I cannot say this whole thing correctly. It is Native American and Alaska Native Heritage Month. I have been struggling with saying that whole sentence without messing up. But it is their month. It is time to honor the people whose land we are all on for 1 month. There may be some sarcasm ladled throughout this history just because of the irony of it. Let's go back. You know, we have to go back in history to understand why this month, where it started, who started it, the time frame of it all. So we're gonna take a stroll back in time, a flashback, if you will. And of course, as you all may and or may not know, if you are new here, welcome, welcome, welcome. Anytime that I do any type of things like this from our Black histories, I always share all of the articles, any videos, everything will be down below. And this one was loaded with stuff. Again, just it's history, and there's always so much to it. And listen, as I said before, I like to know, and I feel that it's good for you to know what you know. You don't have to take my word for it. Picture it. US of the A, 1914/1915, somewhere in there. Turn of the century. It all started with Francis St. James, or who was also called Red Fox James, who was of the Blackfoot tribe, who my grandmother says we have in our family, but I don't know how to prove that yet because, you know, they don't keep records of Black people for up to so long, and we were misplaced and displaced. But that's what my grandmother told me. But it started off with him from everything that I've read. And once again, you'll find down below. But basically, he, you know, wanted to push that there was an Indian Day. It says that he actually rode his horse 4,000 miles trying to get support of Indian Day. And in doing so, he was actually able to get 24 endorsements from governors. He then took these endorsements, rode to Washington, D.C., and he presented them. Now, everything that I've read did not say that it actually came to pass, but he did it 2 years. He did it in 1914 and he did it in 1915, but nothing ever happened with it. It wasn't until the president of the Congress of the American Indian Association, Arapaho Reverend Sherman Coolidge, who was also one of the founders of SAI, which is the Society of American Indians, which was established in 1911. It wasn't until he issued a proclamation, and he did this on September the 18th, 1915, for there to be an Indian Day. And it was set for the 2nd May of each year as American Indian Day. At the same time, he was also appealing for U.S. citizenship for American Indians. So like I said, he did this in 1915. Native Americans were not actually considered to be Americans, like actual citizens, until 1924. So almost 10 years later. And then later on, I didn't find the date for it, but it does say that that was later amended to also include Alaskan natives. And even with that, even with them now being citizens of the United States, they actually still weren't even allowed to vote until 1950s. So again, another almost 26 years later before they actually even had the rights of every other U.S. citizen. So that was where that started. Now, from there, because, you know, even still to date, states still do some things individually. So the first state to actually designate an American Indian Day was the state of New York. They did this in 1916, and it was also set for the 2nd Saturday in May. Because of that, several other states followed the trend behind New York and kind of based theirs off of what New York did. It was sporadic. It was a few states here and there that liked the idea of it, of, you know, honoring the people whose land we're all on. And from there, it did continue to grow. So now we arrive at 1976 as this is growing from state to state. And at this time, President Ford was in office. He proclaimed a week in October as Native American Awareness Week. Since then, every president after him has done the same thing. Every single year they make a proclamation. And when he did it, he said that it could either be a day, a week, or a month. Another thing that happened over the growing years of awareness of it is in 1989, the state of South Dakota got rid of Columbus Day and changed it to Native American Day. Then we roll into 1990. George Bush Sr., along with Congress, made the month of November Native American and Alaska Native Heritage Month. So that was when it actually came together for Native Americans and Alaskan Americans, and when it was then a month-long event. And again, it has been the tradition of each seated president to do this every single year. So it happened with Bush, who was after Bush, Clinton, who was after Clinton, Bush Jr., and then after him was Barack Obama. So then that brings us to 2009. The President of Barack Obama did make the proclamation that November was going to be Native American and Alaska Native Heritage Month. In addition, he did also write into law that the Friday following Thanksgiving, which here in the U.S. is commonly known as Black Friday, he actually designated that as a Native American Heritage Day. And to this day, there are actually some states that do observe it, and people do actually get that day as a paid holiday. It's not everywhere, but there are several states that do acknowledge it and they do observe it. And when I did research on it, I did find that it's not a federal holiday. It's just a holiday. But it is cool that at least some states do observe it and people do get the day off to actually observe it and appreciate it, and they do get paid for it. They should. So, that is how Native American and Alaska Native Heritage Month came to be. So I want to now debunk some stuff. Let's do some debunking, because there are clearly some narratives that have been painted of Native and Alaska Natives through media and TV over years that are just absolutely not true. I'm not going to assume that people know these things because, we don't all know everything. And a lot of times histories of anyone of color is taught, that much. So we don't always get the full history of, natives. We don't always get the full history of Black people or anybody else of color to the extent of other people. So that's what I want to do. Let's give some history. Let's, erase some of these false narratives that have been painted. One of the first ones being that thousands, tens of thousands of years ago, this was their land. All of it. From Alaska, Canada, all the way down. It was theirs. Different tribes, different cultures, but this was their land. Some people may not have known that. I also read this random article that said that there was some walkway or bridgeway that went from Russia to Alaska. And no, we're not talking about, what's her name that was running for vice president years ago that could see Russia from her, no, not her. It was said that there was a walkway or a bridgeway that went from Russia to Alaska or somewhere up that way. And that there were natives that trekked across this walkway or bridgeway. And then that's how they got here. And then from there, they went from Alaska and then expanded out, and then expanded down. I feel like that may be true, where natives did expand from, the upper parts of North America. Did they get there by walking this way from Russia? That don't sound right to me. All of them? Like all the natives? All of them? I don't trust it. Either way it goes, originally the land, the continent, North America, was inhabited by natives and Alaska natives, period. So if you didn't know that, now you do. Another thing to debunk and that people may not know is that Natives, indigenous people, they're not all the same. They're not all the same. They don't all do the same thing. They don't all wear the same things. They don't all have the same, cultural or religious or tribal or spiritual views. They're different, which is why they have different names, Arapaho, Cherokee, Blackfoot. Like, the names are there because they're different. Just in case you didn't know that. Another thing, what was depicted in movies, just going to it, was black and white, and how they always showed, the Indian man, and they always had the head dressed with the feathers. Not all tribes do that. And they don't just wear them just to be wearing them. Like, they're not flexing. They aren't flexing on the white man they don't do that. They don't do that. The tribes that actually do wear the headdresses, those are normally done for ceremony reasons. Just in case you didn't know. Even the same thing with moccasins. I know that's kind of a general thing, but I read an article that said, not every tribe wore moccasins. It's one of those things that you just don't know. But it's that not every tribe wears moccasins. Sometimes even with the beadwork and stuff like that, not every tribe does that. Each tribe is specific. Each tribe have their own rituals, their own cultures, and their own practices. So in case you didn't know that, you can't just group them all into one box and say, oh, well, they all do this, because they do not. Small fun fact in case you didn't know. Hey, it and me. I knew I was going to leave something out. So one thing that I did want to add to the debunk list is, just because your great-great-great-grandmother was part Navajo, part Cherokee, does not mean that you are part of the Navajo or Cherokee or Arapaho. It does not mean that you are part of that clan. There are certain requirements and certain things that you have to do to actually be seen, recognized, and adopted as a member of native tribes or clans. You have to prove, lineage as far as who the person was in your family. You have to have a certain percentage of the blood in your blood. You have to have a certain percentage of that blood type. So you can't just be like, yeah, my great-great-great-great-grandmother was Cherokee, so now I'm Cherokee. That's not how they do it. That's not how they work. If everything lines up and if they are accepting people in, at that point, then you may be adopted in and recognized as a person, part of the tribe or clan. So I wanted to share that just in case people did not know. Another thing that has been depicted through media, teepees. Not all Native Americans lived in teepees. It wasn't a thing for everybody. I mean, imagine being in Alaska in a teepee, negative 30, 40, 50. Can you really imagine that? That doesn't even make sense. From everything that I have read, their dwellings, their spaces were based on the climate that they were in. So, for instance, Alaska, they lived in what were called longhouses. They were these very long, I'll probably post a picture, I'll probably put a picture here. Long wooden houses, and a lot of times they would house multiple families. They were generally, from everything that I read, I'm going to keep saying that, no windows, and there was basically an opening there was a chimney, pretty much. And that's what they lived in Alaska. You then, let's go to the opposite side, the South, Carolinas. From what I read there, the spaces, the dwellings in North Carolina were made of woven sapling, plastered with mud, and the roofs were made of poplar tree bark. And in the summer months, when it got warmer, from what I read, is that they then had open air spaces. So you might have basically a frame of a space and just the wooden roofing, for protection against the sun. But it was pretty much open. Another place, let's go. So we were in Alaska, we went down to North Carolina. Let's move to the middle, right into the Rocky Mountains area, Colorado, that area. From what I saw and read, the people there, or the natives there, actually, their dwellings or spaces were carved out of the rock and the stone of the area. I even read that some tribes actually lived within caves within the mountains. So it varied from place to place. Let's bring it right on home. Bring it right on home here to Michigan. I reached out to one of my neighbors, and I'm going to read this to make sure that I say it correctly, because it's it's an official title, so I have to make sure I say it correctly. So he is actually a member of the Nottawasepi Huron band of Potawatomi Red-Tailed Hawk Clan, whose roots are tied here to Michigan. So I reached out to him and I was like, well, hey, what did your people live in here? And he said here that they lived in what were called wigwams, or wetu is another name that I found. And from what I read and what I looked up is that basically the frame of it was made of wooden, like a bent pole type of thing. And then it would be encased in sometimes bark. It would be sometimes be encased in some type of cloth. It could be grass. It could be bushes or brushes. He said they were birch bark half domes. And he said that they lived in these year round, but sometimes in the summer months they would disperse out and they would go to smaller villages, but then they would always come back to them. So again, not a TP. Most people actually don't know that. That is definitely not something that's taught, and it's definitely not something that you find in your traditional, public school or even private ones. They just don't teach that type of history. So another fun fact, in case that you didn't know it, they didn't all live in teepees. It was definitely another fun fact. So, as you all know, I live here in Michigan. I stay in Detroit. There's this gorgeous, beautiful, historic area. It is 1 mile long and 3 streets called Indian Village. It has nothing to do with Indians living here. It was bought by the Cook family that basically wanted to make an upscale area. That's how they built the houses. They built them and they made them expensive. So you had architects like Albert Kahn and William Stratton, and then the folks that were buying the houses were people like Edsel Ford and Bernard Stroll and Arthur Buell. So do not be fooled by the name. And it was also quoted that the name was used to romanticize it, which, appropriation, because, that's what people do. So just in case you didn't know that, and it's a gorgeous area, but the name of it had nothing to do with Native Americans actually being on this land. And my neighbor that I was telling you about, him kind of going through their history and just where they were when it came to the state, it wasn't within that 1 mile, 3 street radius. So yeah, just in case you didn't know, has nothing to do with Native Americans. Now that we have debunked some of the false narratives that have been taught and pressed and pushed about natives, let's now talk about some of the native people. Let's talk about the natives that have made stamps in history, that have pushed for, equality and fairness, that have broken barriers, that were first to do things. So let's start with, so I've already mentioned Red Fox James. I've also Reverend Sherman Coolidge. Another person to mention that did make a stamp staple in time in Native American history was Dr. Arthur C. Parker, who was Seneca. He was the director of the Rochester Museum, which is now called the Museum of Arts and Science. He was also an archaeologist. He was an author. He wrote several books, children books, and some more books about Native American and their experience. So with the people, it's going to be a mixture. I'm going to do some, pop movie icons, and then it's going to be some political, and then it's just going to be a mix of people. So one of the first people that came to mind that I know is, amazing actor, been in everything from movie to TV, like he's been in everything, is Graham Greene. Everyone knows him, He's Oneida. He has been in everything. If you don't know him, then you don't watch television or have never been to a movie. He's been in everything. My first encounter with him was I was a child, and it was seeing him in Dances with Wolves. That's where from that moment, I was like, I love him. He's just a superb actor. In the same movie, and in that movie, actually, a lot of the actors that are part of the natives, a lot of them are really real natives. and their actors. The tribes and the clans are different, but that cast was loaded. It wasn't, it wasn't, white people with bad tans and bad wigs, playing native people. There were actually native people in the film. Something that did not always happen early on in the movies. Another person from that movie, and who was also a very big activist and who had a significant role, I think, to me, was his wife in that movie. Her real name is Tantu, and she is Cree Mattis. And another person, she's done everything. TV, she's done, I believe Broadway is what I read too. I'll have everything linked down below, of course. So I think she's done like more like 160 or 200. It's like a large number of roles that she has been in, supporting and both leading. So both of them very, very well accomplished actors and actresses. If we're gonna bring it a little bit more current, then another person is S.K. Spencer. You might know him as Sam from the Twilight series. He was the pack leader. And he is Sioux, Cherokee, and he's also Dutch and French also. He is also an advocate for fighting for Native rights. You may also have seen him in Jessica Jones. He was also in Banshee and Bearskin. Another person, if you watch The Voice, I believe it was 2017, Brooke Simpson. She is Halawa and Sapani and has this beautiful, gorgeous voice. She actually made it to the top 3. Another phenomenal actor, Will Sampson, the 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", gentle soul of a actor. He is actually full-blooded Cree. So he starred opposite Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Head. I met him in Poltergeist 2, where he played Taylor. Another noteworthy person to mention amongst a sea of others is Maria Tallchief. She is Osage, and she became the first American to dance at the Paris Opera House. And her husband, George Bellichin, co-founded the New York City Ballet. And they also relooked and revamped the Sugar Plum Fairy and the Nutcracker. Another person more on a political side is Harlan Pruden, who is First Nation Cree, and he is the co-founder of the New York Northeast Two-Spirit Society. Another person to mention is Jody Gillette, who is Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, and she was the senior policy advisor for Native American Affairs underneath the President Barack Obama administration. I have too many people. I'm just going to have to read from this, okay? All right, so John B. Harrington, Chickasaw, first enrolled member of a tribe to fly as an astronaut, and he was also a NASA commander. So listen, any and everything, natives do it all. Like, amazing people. Now, I did look up, there are so many chiefs. There's no way that I could, number one, read about all of them. Number two, link all of them down below. So I'm just gonna list a few that you can Google in your own time. And I'm gonna read. So one chief is Chief Seattle. Seattle, does that sound familiar? Do you know that name? Kind of like, city? Yeah, look that one up. Chief Seattle. If you are someone from Michigan, I always bring it from home, but Chief Pontiac. We have a whole city called Pontiac and Pontiac Trail, like it's a whole thing here. But Chief Pontiac, Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Little Wolf, Black Elk, Geronimo. Another person that kind of goes into the debunking is Pocahontas. That story, that Disney story, that wasn't it. That is not how, that didn't go down the way that story was told by Disney. That is an interesting story. That one you definitely want to read. So yeah, those are just some chiefs that I would definitely implore, you to look up and just do a little bit of history on them and their accomplishments and who they were and their tribes and what they represented. Now, as I do natural products and hair mainly on my channel, I have to tie that in to this month's history. So we're going to talk about the hair of Native people. Oh, and another thing with that, I read several different things. First Americans, natives, Native Americans, indigenous people, like those are terms that are somewhat interchangeable depending on who you're talking to. As long as you aren't calling them Indians, because they're not from India. And a part of that was because people that came here and colonized it thought that they were in India. And so therefore labeled them as Indians, but that's not where you were, that's not what they are. Just a fun fact in case you didn't know that. So those are just some of the titles that I've read and seen that are preferred when addressing natives. So either natives, Native Americans, First Americans, or indigenous people. There may be others, but those are the ones that I kind of consistently kept seeing. This once again is a tribe to tribe, clan to clan thing that would vary. So particularly with women, you might see, a top knot, you might see a low knot. And like I said, it all depends on the tribe, it depends on the clan. There would still be various different styles that they did wear their hair, or that they do wear their hair. If you were unmarried, then you might see the hair from the couple of ones that I saw, the hair would be like in a large, kind of a flat disc type of shape, and that signified that you were unmarried. In addition to that, you might see the single braid or the double braid, or the hair just flowing. When it comes to men, not as many variations with women's styles, but same thing. The braid, you might see the single braid, you might see a double braid, the hair just may be down. Some things that you do see more so with men from everything that I read is the Mohican style, or what we now call the mohawk, or sometimes just a shaved head. Now, a lot of things that I did read when it comes to natives and when it comes to their hair is that they do not cut their hair. A lot of times, the only reason that they cut their hair is in time of grieving or in time of shame. But outside of that, you let the hair grow. A very interesting article that I read by Paula Lightning Woman Justice, she goes into talking about the more spiritual aspect of the hair and how actually the hair is just an extension of our thoughts. It was a very, very interesting and deep article, which will be linked down below, of course. So again, it just all varies. It depended on the region, it depended on the tribe. Let's talk products. I searched a lot. I could not find a whole lot of hair products. I found one, and it is Sister Sky. They are certified. It is certified. It is women-owned and approved by the Intertribal Agricultural Council. It has to be certified in order for them to use the Made by American Indians trademark. So because of that, they can actually put that on their bottles. A lot of what I kind of stumbled across were articles or blogs where, a native person had written about more so the spiritual side of it. And within the comments of it, people would ask questions and they would talk about traditions that were passed down to them from parents, grandparents on caring for the hair. So a lot of care and treatment that natives do are natural. And per the name, JermaineAuNatural, that's ideally what we want. You want. So there are some people that use shampoo. There are some people that don't. The ones that do use shampoo always go for the more clean shampoos, sulfate-free, free of mineral oils, free of parabens, which that's what I do too. Like that's going to be more beneficial for your hair and scalp health. So the folks that do use products tend to go for products that are in that direction, more clean ingredients. Other things that I saw that people read that said that their grandparents did and that their parents did and that they do, a lot of different tea rinses, which I've seen people do tea rinses, but a lot of different tea rinses. Tea rinses made of rosemary, bearberry, or sweetgrass. Another thing that I did read is that native hair actually gets oily, so very different from black hair, our hair is generally dry. We trying to get to the moisture. We trying to get to the oil. Their hair naturally produces more oil. So they kind of use that based off of what the hair naturally does to help keep it moisturized and healthy. I did read that there are some folks that make their own things, and so they do make, in addition to like the teas for rinses, there are some folks that actually do make shampoos, and they make the shampoos out of yarrow or yucca or creeping juniper. And typically for moisturizing, from everything that I read, a various amount of different oils. I saw coconut oils quite a few times that people said that they use on their hair. Saw palmetto was very big, very common for a lot of different things. Wild mint, tea tree for moisture and for treating, scalp issues. And then a lot of things that I saw when it came to, actually cleaning the hair when they're doing these processes, rinsing with cold water. As cold as you can stand to close the cuticle of the hair, which is what that does. Really, really simple. And then using heat was not a thing. The hair is in a lot of instances naturally straight. I did read an article or two of natives that were further south that do have curly hair, but flat irons, there are people that do it, but they're like, no, you don't need to do that. Some of the elders, you don't need to do that. Our hair doesn't require all of that. So those were the things that I found and read when it comes to how natives generationally pass down how they care for their hair. All right, that was a lot. This was a lot. Everything will be linked down below. Not everything, but a lot will be. And I also came across this interesting book that spoke about a couple of native tribes and African Americans and how they fought against slavery in, I think, Ohio and Kansas. I'll have that link down below too. Interesting read. All right, so did I leave something out? I'm pretty sure I probably pronounced something wrong, not intentionally and not to be disrespectful. And hopefully you learned something from this. Hopefully there was something new that you didn't know, or hope there was something that I shared that cleared up. Maybe that was something that you were taught or believed to be true. Also. So since this is Native American and Alaska Native Heritage Month, there are a ton of things that are happening. I know this is the end of the month, but there are still things going. There are a lot of virtual things that you can still attend, which I'll have linked down below. Things at the Smithsonian and things like that you can still attend. I am wearing red, and this is for Red Shawl, which is to bring awareness and draw attention to the horrible acts of violence committed against American Indian and Alaskan Native people, particularly women and children. And the red symbolizes the loss of sacred life, blood through violence. So wearing red just to bring attention to that. There's also a Moccasins Day. Did I mention that already? That was on the 19th, 18th, something like that. So there are a few social media hashtags that you can look up. The first one is Rock Your Mocks 2020, or just Rock Your Mocks. Hashtag Red Shawl Week for the red. Native American Heritage Day, which once again is November the 29th, the day after Thanksgiving. And I know there's a really big following that is on TikTok that I read also. It might be called First Nation or First People is the hashtag. And from there, you'll see a lot of Native American people, sharing stories and the histories there. I will also have, I will just have everything. There's so much. I'll have everything tagged down below. Also, I did come across 14 Native-owned beauty and skincare brands. I will also have those linked down below, but just to name a couple: Intertribal Beauty Cosmetics. Another one that I found is Yukon Soap Company, which you guys know I love me a good natural soap. Blended Girl Cosmetics, Billy Beauty, Indigenous Cosmetics, Bison Star Naturals, which shows here that they have some good lotions that are really, really big and popular. Sequoia. So I'll have those linked down below so that you can discover those and look and see what they're about and support. All right, I hope that's everything. I hope I didn't leave anything out. I hope this video is not an hour long. All right, so yeah, leave comments down below with just any additional feedback. If I reported something wrong, please let me know. Make sure you like this video, press the subscribe button, punch the notification bell so that you can stay abreast of when I post my videos. And again, thank you for tuning into JermaineAuNatural and this month's Black history, a piece every month. Remix. See you next time.